Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, pretty intense. We've got source material that isn't just suggesting a new way to think. It's really demanding a complete overhaul, a radical, immediate psychological revolution.
That's a good way to put it. It's about dismantling, well, everything. We tend to rely on institutions, authority figures, even our sense of self, all in the name of finding what's true.
It's a huge undertaking. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack that. We're looking at these talks, these writings that fundamentally challenge how people approach spirituality, authority, personal change.
And they're not exactly gentle talks, are they? It's more like a surgical strike on our ingrained habits, our reliance on organized belief, gurus, the whole idea that change takes time.
Yeah, comfort is definitely not the goal here.
No. The aim is to really pull out the core arguments for this idea of unconditional individual freedom. Why this insistence on total demolition, not just renovation?
Okay, let's dive in. The starting point seems to be the external world organized religion, spiritual structures.
This philosophy isn't about fixing them, is it?
Not at all. It's stating, quite boldly, that the second you try to organize truth, you essentially destroy it. That's the foundation. #tag the rejection of organized authority and belief.
Okay, so truth itself. What's the definition we're working with here?
The sources use the term satchai, truth, and define it as anant infinite, boundless, without condition.
Infinite. Okay, so by definition, you can't package it.
Exactly. How can you put something infinite into a structure, a system, a series of steps? It's impossible.
There's that powerful metaphor used. The moment belief gets organized, it dies and becomes a stone.
Yes, that's striking, isn't it? It shifts from something living, dynamic, a personal discovery, into this rigid thing, a creed, a dogma, a set of rules.
A stone. Something hard, lifeless, and often used to hit people over the head with, figuratively speaking. Precisely. And once it's a stone, it's imposed on others. It becomes a tool for control, a substitute for actual individual understanding. It stops being about personal insight and becomes about conforming to the group's doctrine.
It forces the individual into the shape of the doctrine rather than letting them find the shape of truth for themselves.
The living quality is lost.
And there's that analogy about accessing this truth. You can't just order it delivered, can you?
No, absolutely not. The analogy is you can't bring the mountain peak down into the valley.
Right.
If truth is that summit, the individual has to make the climb. Alone, no cable car, no group tour.
And that climb involves facing, well, scary parts, the edges of our own fears.
Definitely. Facing our conditioning, our comforts, our reliance on others telling us what's true. The journey requires that individual effort, that willingness to proceed without the safety net of external validation.
Which brings us to maybe the most dramatic example in the source material, this decision to dissolve a huge organization.
Yes, a worldwide organization built over 18 years, anticipating a world teacher, thousands of members. It's quite something.
And he just pulls the plug. Why?
For the exact reasons we've been discussing. The core insight was that any organization created for a spiritual purpose, no matter how well-intentioned, inevitably becomes a cage, a limitation, a bond.
A crutch, you said earlier.
Exactly. It becomes a substitute for the real work, the inner journey. If you're seeking something unconditional, the path, the means to get there also has to be unconditional. Organizations impose conditions, structures, hierarchies.
So even with thousands of followers, it was seen as a barrier.
A fundamental barrier to individual growth towards that unconditional truth. It provided a sense of security, perhaps, but it was the security of a prison cell.
I can only imagine how the members felt. The sources mention a reporter being completely baffled by this.
Yeah, the reporter apparently asked, how can you go on without all this infrastructure, all these followers? It highlights the typical worldly view of power and influence.
How did the speaker respond?
Unequivocally. He said he did not want followers.
That's radical in itself.
It is, because the principle is absolute. The moment you follow someone, you cease following truth. Following is passive. It means you're letting someone else do the thinking, the exploring.
You're essentially outsourcing your own psychological or spiritual work.
Yeah.
It dulls your own intelligence, maybe.
It completely suppresses it. Why would I search for the key if I believe you already have it? So losing thousands of members who were described as, quote, frozen in old thought.
It's seen as necessary.
Necessary, perhaps even irrelevant to the core purpose. The calculation was stark. If just 5 people truly understood and lived this, if their minds were genuinely free, that was infinitely more valuable than thousands simply adhering to a structure.
Depth over breadth. Transformation over adherence.
Precisely.
And to achieve this kind of individual awakening, the communication style had to be uncompromising.
Yes, absolutely direct. Plain speaking, no emotional manipulation, no softening the blow to keep people comfortable or to gain followers.
It's described as a kind of real love, isn't it? Like a surgeon.
Exactly like a surgeon. The operation might be painful, but the intention is to heal, to remove the malignancy. Spiritual honesty in this view has to be that direct. Diluting the message just creates more confusion, reinforces the need for external comfort, and ultimately prevents freedom.
Freedom from all the cages, fear of religion, fear of death, fear of life itself.
All of it. So the highest form of love, paradoxically, is refusing to be that comforting authority figure.
Refusing to build a new cage, even a gilded one.
Because the moment you provide the easy answer, the system, the guru, you stop the individual's own questioning process. And that questioning is intelligence in action.
Organized belief systems, then, inherently lead to confusion, not clarity.
Because they impose a false order on something that requires fluid, personal exploration. Real transformation demands that self-initiated spark, that voluntary turning of the mind. You have to dissolve the external cages first to even begin to see the internal jailer.
Okay, that's a perfect transition. Dissolve the external authorities, the organizations, and then you're left facing yourself, the internal architect of those cages.
Right. This is where we get into the real core of the psychological revolution, understanding the I consciousness.
What is this I? The sources define it in a really specific, almost deflationary way.
Very much so. The I, the self, this collection of memories, reactions, ambitions, fears, beliefs, is defined as solely the result of the environment.
Solely.
It is. When you say my personality, my opinions, my talents, my house, my relationships, this entire sense of identity is presented as being constructed by your surroundings. Culture, family, education, society. It's all absorbed.
So if I'd been born somewhere else, different parents, different language, my I would be completely different. It's just an echo.
A temporary, localized echo of the conditions you happen to be born into. That's the argument.
And this temporary echo, this I, what's its driving force?
One thing. Primarily. Permanence, immortality. Because it's born from the constantly changing, fleeting environment, it inherently senses its own impermanence. So it develops this deep-seated fear of ending. Its entire project becomes about securing itself, achieving a continuous state, fighting against dissolution.
And that effort is what we call ambition, striving, even seeking spiritual enlightenment sometimes.
Yes, the whole drive to become something, to achieve lasting security for the ego.
Okay, now here's a point I, and probably many listeners, might struggle with. We experience conflict all the time, inner conflict, conflict with others, with society. We tend to think of it as a struggle between something true or good in us and something false or bad outside us.
Right, the classic good versus evil or me versus the world narrative.
But the source material claims conflict only exists between two falsehoods. How does that work?
It's a profound point and, counterintuitive. The argument is this. The psychological conflict we feel is only between the I, which we've just defined as a falsehood, a conditioned construct.
And the environment itself, which is also constantly changing and, in a sense, shaping that I.
Exactly. The environment, society, relationships, economic systems is also a product of collective conditioning, fears, and desires. So the conflict is between one conditioned entity, the self, and the conditioning field, the environment it arose from.
So it's not truth fighting falsehood.
The claim is truth and falsehood cannot be in conflict. Where truth is, falsehood simply ceases to exist, like light and darkness. You don't fight darkness, you bring in light.
So my internal struggle to be less greedy, for instance, that's just one conditioned pattern fighting another.
Yes, your greed likely arises from societal conditioning, insecurity, the desire for permanence, and your idea of non-greed or goodness is probably also a conditioned ideal learned from the environment. So the struggle is just the result of the environment battling the environment that created it. Illusion fighting illusion.
Condition versus condition. Wow. Okay. And the I is trying to achieve permanence in this impermanent soup.
And that fundamental mismatch, that internal contradiction, is the engine of psychological suffering. The very effort to be permanent generates the conflict.
And this desperate need for security, for the ego's continuation, is what leads us to build these huge external structures, like organized religion.
Absolutely. Religions, rigid moral codes, nationalism, political ideologies, cults. They all offer a promise of security, of permanence, of belonging for the fragile I.
And that desire creates fear. Fear of not belonging, fear of uncertainty.
Intense fear. And fear is the breeding ground for authority. We seek someone or something, a god, a leader, a system to tell us what to do, to make us feel safe.
And where you have authority born of fear.
You inevitably have exploitation, often subtle, disguised as something beneficial.
Like spiritual progress. Follow these rules and you'll achieve salvation or enlightenment.
Exactly. People embrace the system because it offers a known structure, a promise of future security, even if the price is their own critical thinking, their own psychological freedom. They trade the terrifying unknown of freedom for the comforting known of the cage.
This really reframes things like collective action or social change. If society is just the sum total of individuals and the individuals are confused,
Then mass movements, collective action, become, as the source puts it, a fancy word, unless the individual first understands their own inner state, their own contribution to the confusion.
society is an abstraction. The individual is the reality.
That's the emphasis. Lasting, meaningful change in the world, peace, order, love, can only happen when individuals take full personal responsibility for their own psychological state, for waking up from their own fear-based illusions.
So trying to fix the world's problems without addressing the individual's inner conflict is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
It's chasing symptoms, yes. The world acts as a mirror. A confused, fearful, ambitious individual projects that confusion outwards, creating a confused, fearful, ambitious society. The only path to a sane environment is through individual, self-aware transformation. You can't legislate peace if your heart is at war. #, the illusion of method and time.
Okay, so we've dismantled external authority. We've looked at the I as a conditioned thing in conflict. The natural next question for anyone listening is probably, okay, fine, how do I fix it? What's the method? Give me the steps.
And that's perfectly understandable. It's the default human response, isn't it? We want a system, a technique, a how-to guide.
But this philosophy pulls the rug out from under that impulse too.
Completely. The very act of seeking a method, a system, is framed as a fundamental misunderstanding. It's seen as an escape from the conflict, not a way to understand it.
An escape? How so?
Because asking for a method implies you want a predefined path to a known goal. But if truth is infinite, unknown, unconditional, how can there be a fixed path? A method is for assembling furniture, not for realizing boundless truth.
Right. A method works when the destination is known and reachable through predictable steps.
Exactly. Using a system is trying to force life, which is fluid and unpredictable, into a rigid pattern. The desire for a method is really a desire to avoid the discomfort, the pain of directly confronting the conflict within yourself right here, right now. It's looking for a correspondence course in living.
And one of the most common methods we use, consciously or not, is self-discipline, control. I must force myself to be better.
Yes, and we're often taught that self-discipline is a virtue. But the sources here make a controversial claim. They equate self-discipline with suppression.
Interchangeable. Why?
Because both, fundamentally, are seen as negating intelligence, and both are rooted in fear.
Fear. How is discipline fear-based?
You discipline yourself, force yourself into a pattern, either out of fear of external consequences, punishment, social disapproval, or fear of internal consequences. Fear of failure, fear of not achieving a desired state, fear of your own impulses. It's coercive.
So forcing yourself to fit a mold, even a good mold, without truly understanding why, that kills intelligence.
It suppresses the capacity for direct perception and understanding. Intelligence, in this context, is the ability to see clearly, without distortion, without the filter of fear or desire or prejudgment. When you just follow rules, externally or internally imposed, you shut down that capacity.
There's a distinction made between a primitive person and an intelligent person regarding desire. Can you unpack that?
It's a key distinction. The so-called primitive person, and this isn't about culture, it's about psychological approach, simply acts on desire or reacts against pain without understanding the underlying mechanism. They might use disciplined, rigid rules to try and control this chaos, like forcing themselves to fast out of fear of gluttony.
Okay. And the intelligent person?
The intelligent person, in this view, doesn't just react. They understand the whole process of desire, how it arises, the pleasure it promises, the pain inherent in its pursuit. Their action comes from that clarity, that deep, voluntary insight, not from imposing a rule based on fear. Discipline binds the mind. Intelligence liberates it.
So if we reject methods, we also have to reject the idea of time as a factor in transformation. This might be the hardest pill to swallow. The idea that I'll get better gradually.
Oh, absolutely. This is perhaps the deepest illusion. Time feels like our ally, our chance to slowly improve. Give me 20 years and I'll become nonviolent or whatever the goal is.
But the argument is that this reliance on time is a guarantee of not changing.
Precisely. It's a delusion. If you say, I will practice nonviolence over the next 2 decades, what does that statement actually mean? It means you are violent right now, today.
And you've just given yourself permission to continue being violent with a vague promise of stopping someday.
Exactly. You've pushed the resolution into the future, which allows the conflict, the violence to persist now. You're essentially saying, my current state is acceptable because I have a plan to change it later.
So psychologically, time becomes a mechanism for procrastination, a way to postpone dealing with the immediate reality.
It's the mind's ultimate safety net. We use psychological time to accumulate pleasant memories or to plan the avoidance of future pain. Seeking freedom through time is just seeking a continuation of the same old patterns, the same conflicts, maybe dressed up differently. Time relies on memory, and memory is the past.
And this connects directly to the concept of karma, doesn't it? The sources seem to redefine it very psychologically.
Very much so. Forget cosmic scorecards or reincarnation in the traditional sense. Here, karma is presented as the immediate, practical, psychological burden of the past.
The burden of the unexamined past environment.
Yes. Karma is the momentum of your conditioning. It's the residue of yesterday's experiences, thoughts, emotions, conflicts, the ones you didn't fully understand and resolve, carrying over and distorting your perception and action today.
Can you give a concrete example?
Sure. Let's say you had a bitter argument yesterday. You felt resentment, anger, hurt. If you didn't fully see, understand, and dissolve that psychological residue then, you carry it into today. That's the burden, the karma. Okay. Now today, you meet someone new. But because you're still carrying yesterday's bitterness, your perception of this new person is clouded. Your reaction to them is colored by that unresolved past. Your action towards them is therefore incomplete, distorted.
And that distorted action creates new consequences, new burdens for tomorrow.
Exactly. That's the chain of karma. Incomplete perception and action in the past shapes the present, and incomplete action in the present shapes the future. It's a cycle of conditioned response, broken only by full awareness in the now.
So the revolution has to be instant because relying on time just perpetuates the karma, the burden.
Yes. Tomorrow is just today's conditioning projected forward. The mind wants time because it offers a buffer, a space to avoid the intensity of immediate change. But the only escape from conflict is to see it completely, instantly, in the present moment, the only reality there is. #tag path to immediate freedom, seeing is action.
Okay, so no external authorities, no methods, no relying on time. What's left? If transformation has to be instant, how does that spark happen?
It happens through something deceptively simple yet incredibly difficult. Total, non-judgmental awareness in the present moment.
Awareness.
Yes. And crucially, this awareness leads to the cessation of seeking. Think about it. Conflict, psychological pain, only really becomes undeniable when it's so intense that the mind's usual escape routes, justification, blame, seeking future solutions just stop working.
When the pain is too great to ignore or rationalize away.
Right. And in that moment, when you're fully, intensely aware of the conflict as it is, the fear, the greed, the loneliness, the very impulse to search for a solution becomes, well, meaningless.
Why meaningless? Isn't finding a solution the goal?
Because the search for a solution maintains the duality. There's me, the sufferer, looking for the solution somewhere else, maybe in the future. But if you are in complete, intense contact with the fact of the suffering right now, that very intensity of observation is the dissolving agent.
So the seeking itself is part of the problem because it implies separation and future resolution.
Exactly. Seeking implies time and distance. Total awareness is immediate, present. In that state, the division between observer and observed starts to break down. The pain is so immediate it forces a stop to the mind's running, and in that stopping, the conflict loses its fuel.
This brings us to that core idea. Seeing is action. The analogy used is about immediate physical danger.
Yes, it's a very powerful analogy. If you see a venomous snake right by your foot, or if your house catches fire,
You don't sit down and think about it.
no, you don't consult a manual, you don't form a committee on snake removal, you don't plan to deal with the fire next week. The action is instantaneous, total, driven by the immediate perception of danger.
So the challenge is to see psychological dangers, like nationalism, ambition, greed, with that same life or death clarity.
Precisely. If you could see the inherent destructiveness of nationalism, or the deep-seated violence in your own ambition, or the profound emptiness behind your cherished beliefs with the same intensity and immediacy as seeing that snake.
The action of dropping it, of being free from it, would be just as instantaneous.
That's the claim. Seeing is the action. There's no gap between perception and response when the danger is fully realized. The problem dissolves in the moment of complete seeing, not through a process of deciding to change later.
But let's be honest, our minds usually aren't that sharp. We're masters of justification, condemnation, denial. That dulls the perception, right?
Absolutely. That dullness is the accumulation of habit, of conditioning. We immediately judge, that's bad, I shouldn't feel this, or justify, it's okay, everyone does it, or simply look away. This prevents the clear seeing. The source material says the mind must become sharp as a needle and strong as a diamond.
Sharp enough to pierce the layers of self-deception. Strong enough to withstand the intensity of what it sees without running away.
Exactly. Only a mind that is fiercely attentive, but also quiet meaning, not judging, not condemning, not comparing, can hold that intensity of perception long enough for the truth of the situation to reveal itself fully.
And to get that sharpness, we need to understand the things that keep it dull, like the interplay of fear and pleasure.
They're presented as fundamentally interconnected, two sides of the same coin, along with sorrow, thought, and violence. It's all one tangled process.
Okay, so how does the pleasure cycle work, according to this view?
It's broken down quite clinically, 4 steps. First, seeing, perceiving something desirable. Second, sensation, the physical or emotional response. Third, contact, engaging with it. And fourth, the crucial step, desire.
Desire specifically meaning the desire to repeat the experience.
Yes, that's the key. The mind registers the pleasure, stores it as memory, and then demands its continuation or repetition.
And that's where the trouble starts, the demand for repetition.
Immediately. The moment the mind clings to the memory and demands more, pain and fear are born. You fear losing the source of pleasure, or you fear not being able to get it again. You're now living with the burden of a past delight, which creates anxiety about the future.
So pleasure-seeking is inherently linked to fear and sorrow.
It's the engine driving the cycle of psychological dependence and suffering. We chase pleasure relentlessly, trying to capture and hold on to fleeting moments, which guarantees future disappointment and fear.
And why do we cling so hard? What are we trying to cover up with all this seeking?
According to the source, it's a profound inner emptiness, loneliness. Not just being physically alone, but a deep psychological sense of lack, of incompletion.
And fear comes from that feeling.
The ultimate fear is the terror of that inner void, the hollowness that appears when our dependencies on people, beliefs, status, pleasure are threatened or removed. We build our lives like elaborate structures over this emptiness, and fear is the constant anxiety that the structure might collapse.
This makes the idea of aloneness really critical, especially when talking about love. There's a distinction between isolation and true aloneness.
A vital distinction. Isolation is a defense mechanism. It's building walls, withdrawing out of fear of being hurt. It's a state of fear. Aloneness in this philosophy is something entirely different.
What is it then?
It's the state of being whole, complete in oneself, psychologically independent, not needing anything external, not a person, not a belief, not an achievement to validate or complete you. It's a state free from the fear of loneliness.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Almost terrifyingly vulnerable for most people.
It requires absolute psychological freedom, yes. It is the ultimate vulnerability, in a way. But the argument is that only from this state of true aloneness, of inner completeness, can love actually arise.
Because love, in this view, isn't about seeking security from someone else.
Absolutely not. Love is not desire, it's not attachment, it's not jealousy, it's not possession, it's not even the opposite of hate. It's something the mind, which operates based on past experience and future projection, cannot possibly cultivate or manufacture.
So you can't work on loving someone more.
Not in this framework. Love is described as a state of being, a spontaneous, timeless reality that emerges only when the self, the I, with its demands, fears, and need for security, is completely absent, completely silent.
It's pure, unmotivated passion.
Yes, passion without an object, without lust, without seeking a return. It requires total freedom, especially freedom from seeking security in relationships. If you're using a relationship to fill your own emptiness, that's need, not love. Love appears when the self is abandoned.
Okay, so this entire journey, rejecting authority, understanding the self, seeing through method and time, understanding pleasure and fear, it all seems to converge on one final point: living fully, intensely in the present moment.
That's the essence. Eternity isn't some future paradise. It's hidden in the depth of the now. When you're free from the psychological burden of the past, the memories, the conditioning, the karma, you can meet each moment, each thought, each person with freshness, with full energy.
No residue.
No residue. The transformation, the revolution isn't a future event. It has to happen now, in this instant. To live in this radical sense means being in constant, fresh movement, never arriving at a fixed point, because any fixed point, any achievement the ego holds on to becomes another cage.
Wow. Okay. We have really gone through a challenging philosophy today. This deep dive has unpacked a call for revolution that rejects nearly every psychological comfort we normally cling to. Organized religion, gurus, the idea of gradual improvement, even the stability of the ego itself.
It's an uncompromising path, definitely. The core argument is relentless. Immediate, individual psychological transformation is the only way out of conflict and illusion.
And the power, if you accept the premise, seems to lie in its immediacy. That idea that if you genuinely see the danger of your own conditioning, the fear, the ambition, the justifications with absolute clarity, then the action of stepping away from it is instantaneous, like dropping a hot coal. There's no deliberation needed once the danger is fully perceived. Seeing is the action that frees.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a really profound challenge, doesn't it? It flips the usual question on its head. It's not about what steps must I do to achieve freedom later. The challenge posed by this deep dive is far more direct and perhaps more difficult. Are you willing to simply look at what you are right now? To look at the conditioning, the conflict, the fear, the whole structure of the I, without judgment, without trying to escape it, without the comfort of saying, I'll fix it tomorrow.
Exactly. Because the ultimate point seems to be that only in facing that raw fact, the truth of what is, without flinching, only then does the psychological problem, the conflict itself, cease to exist.